Hi everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in once again. So this panel is on dipping a toe into data, an overview for those interested or new to a career in data. So I think everyone knows that nowadays startups everywhere are continuing to invest in talent and as well as technology to leverage available data for better decision making and developing strategic initiatives. So in this panel, we've gathered people back from CEOs and CTOs, and later on they'll give a brief introduction of themselves. So just a gentle reminder that there will be a Q&A at the end of the panel as well. So if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to just put them in the Q&A section, and then we'll get to that towards the end of the session. So to start things off, I can do the introduction. My name is Daryl. I'm the data track lead of Startup Boston League. Previously, I've worked in startups across the US, UK, as well as Singapore, across multiple YC-backed startups. So I have a passion for the New England startup ecosystem, and I'm really interested in that space. And I can't wait to get to the panel and just learn more about careers in data. So to start things off, Rishabh, do you want to do a brief introduction of yourself, followed by Sahil and Vishal?
Okay, happy to. Hey everyone, my name is Rishabh. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Mount. Mount is a amenity sharing platform or marketplace that you can use to rent anything from anyone at any time. My interest in this panel, actually Daryl invited me onto this panel because of my past experience as a project manager where I worked with BU Spark. It's an organization that essentially uses publicly available data sets to extract insights for governments and nonprofits. I'm happy to be here and excited to chat with my other panelists.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Rishabh. Hey, everyone. My name is Sahil Sachdev. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for No Seafood. No Seafood is a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand where we sell seafood all across the United States. And we leverage VeChain's blockchain transparency tool for our supply chain transparency. I had the pleasure of meeting Daryl, and he invited me onto this panel primarily because of my transition into the world of data science. I graduated with a pre-med bio business administration minor from the University of Southern California before joining MIT for 3 years, where I really studied entrepreneurship, innovation, technology. After that, I co-founded my first fintech venture, which was buy now, pay later service in partnership with the Wyndham Resort Group, where we actually created our own credit scoring algorithm using bank data. Unfortunately, we transitioned into hospitality, and COVID was not the greatest place to be. For our hospitality wasn't the greatest place to be during COVID. So I decided to go back to school, and I just recently completed a master's in data science from the University of Chicago. And I'm excited to speak with everyone here and see how we can kind of help get some future data scientists into this career path.
Mic check. Can you hear me? Okay, sweet. Glad to see everyone, although I can't actually see how many people are here, so I'm assuming it's more than just us four. I'm Vish, CEO of SoWork, CEO and co-founder of SoWork. SoWork is a workplace metaverse, so if you haven't seen it, it's pretty awesome. It's like my inspiration for it was World of Warcraft, but for workplace. So if you've seen like Silicon Valley ever, which I hope you have, it's like the opening scene where like all the different companies have the different buildings, like, you know, when the theme music is playing and they're all there and they're growing and stuff. That's kind of what we're building. So we've got thousands of teams that work in SoWork. They all have their own buildings, and we're kind of hooking them all up, and you get your avatars and you can walk up and the videos automatically connect. And so it's just a really fun way to work. So check it out if you're on a team of any kind. As far as my background, it's a little bit odd. So I started off in entrepreneurship. Me and my brother started our first company when I was about 10. It was computers, basically hardware and software. It's I won't get into the details, but you can ask me later about what it was, because it was a bit odd. Anyway, decided to go into medicine when I was a little bit older. So like early 20s, I kind of made that decision, which is late for medicine, but I think it was good timing for me. So went to medical school. Actually did a bit of a weird degree. I did 2 years in Melbourne and 2 years at Harvard, and finished up there. Then I started working as a doctor like I was doing my general rotations, but emergency was my track. And it just struck me like medicine is super data driven. Like of any field I've ever worked in, like medicine is among the top in terms of data driven. And when we get to the question about New England and data, like that'll be like my answer will expand more on that point. So if you're interested in those two intersections, New England's an amazing place to be. Anyway, I ended up working when I was still in med school at Khan Academy, which I hope many of you guys know about as well. I became one of their top teaching fellows, and I kind of saw how we kind of used data to make decisions about what we should make next on the health and medicine team, but it wasn't super data driven. And then I worked at the WHO in Geneva and worked on some data projects there as well. Started my first company in 2018, which was machine learning for health sciences. We were basically building what we called the Spotify of education, where instead of students having to go out all over the internet and find stuff to like help us get through classes, instead we'd put in a bunch of demographic data about ourselves, and we'd actually work with schools to get grading data back from each student. And then we would train these models that help to sort of recommend the best of the web to the student in like a predefined pathway that kind of auto updated as the student made progress or fucked something up. Are we allowed to swear on here? I don't know. But anyway, so then in mid-pandemic, my company started building SoWork as a better way for us to work together internally as a team, just because we love playing video games. And just lots of teams wanted to come into our world and work in there and move their teams in and stuff. So we're like, all right, we're going to put the machine learning software on the shelf and focus on this. And so now we, the perspective I'll use when talking on this panel will be like hiring and like hiring from a data perspective and what we look for and what we don't look for, and just generally how you can increase your chances at any given company. So that's me. Thanks.
Yeah, amazing. I think we see the diversity of experiences and knowledge. So some came from computer science background, some came from medical background. So I think all in all, this shows like the diversity and kind of the diversity of our panel. So maybe to start things off, Rishabh, could you just elaborate more on like the different verticals in data that you see, and what are the different roles in data?
Yeah. So I guess, like Vishal said, there's a bunch of roles, especially in the medical field. My primary education, or rather my formal education, was in chemistry, where a lot of the work I did towards the end of my degree was geared towards computational analysis of reactions, trying to understand where a reaction is going to end up given certain conditions in the medium and so on. So there's a lot of verticals in data. The more you think of it, data has really expanded from being this thing that is solely something that analysts or computer scientists do to something that's just being used across almost every industry to drive decisions, both business, marketing, and just almost in every vertical. That's what I have to say, but I'd love to hear what everybody else has to say about this.
Yeah, thanks for that, Rishabh. I think that data is so vast in its use case now that it's really sprung up a lot of different verticals, whether you're looking on like the data mining statistical analysis side, which requires some more of like math background, technical background. Obviously business intelligence is a huge field as well. You'll find that a lot of companies hire specifically for individuals who have experience using Power BI or any of the other visualization tools, to like if you're running or like managing your own data architecture and running the warehousing side of it as well. There are a lot of different types of skills that come into data. And I would say like the best way to kind of start is just to understand all the different verticals there are and see which ones are most interesting to you. I have a lot of friends who really focused on like the data mining, statistical analysis, model building side, whether it was like on the machine learning side versus a lot of other ones, especially the ones I interact with on the marketing side. They're more focused on visualizations to better understand how marketing spend is occurring, how is that driving specific metrics, whether it's ROI, ROAS, or so on and so forth. And then also like within different verticals, right? Like we have a marketing as a division, but also cybersecurity is another really big division, or even operations, right? We're finding data really helps businesses run better. And so overall, I think that there are, in my mind, like 9 different verticals, and the best way to kind of start is just to look through them and see which ones are most interesting to you, and kind of hit the ground running through using Medium.
Can I just add one more thing there? So completely agree with you guys. And one thing that I think would be helpful is if you decide like where from a skill position you can add value. So are you going to look at being a data analyst, which has a pretty separate and different job description from being like a data scientist, which is different from being a data engineer, and like all three kind of have to work hand in hand and not necessarily all at the same time. So like if you're going to be like DS number 1 at a startup, then you kind of have to do all three, which is like, okay, you have to set up all the infrastructure, that's your data engineering hat on, and like you have to do that properly. And if you don't know how to do that properly, then like you should like get a mentor, or like ask upper class people, or like I don't know, like just make friends on Twitter or LinkedIn and get help, because I think one of the most unfortunate things that can happen at an early stage startup is to have their data sort of diverted the wrong way in terms of the infrastructure early, because then that has so many implications for how the company makes decisions that you don't want to you really want to get that right. So from a data, if you're thinking early, and most people like I find that so many of the students I meet at the iLab are like, I want to be data science 1 or 2 at a startup, right? Because everybody should have that experience early in the startup, because it teaches you so much more than anything just to do with data. Well, you just want to make sure that you're ready to wear a data engineering hat. Very, very different from like Python and MATLAB and R, right? If you're like just used to working in a lab, for example, very, very different, because you need to actually probably have some JavaScript capabilities. You probably need to have some other sort of even lower level, like architectural experience to be able to build things out. And then, sorry, I know this is really long-winded, but it's really important that like we see the difference between the three, analyst, engineer, and data scientist. But anyway, I'm sure we'll cover this more later in the session, but you should just know what you're up for when you're joining a startup versus like a company that's like Series A and it has like 20 people and there's already infrastructure in place, so you can go in and either DS it or like be a data analyst if you're more junior, right?
Yeah, great points there. And I think building on Sahil and Vishal's one, Sahil mentioned about being aware of the different verticals of data, and I think Vishal briefly touched upon the type of languages used. So Sahil, maybe if you could take this one, what are some important skills in your opinion to break into data? So thinking things like the hard skills, so like programming languages, or certain specific ones that you may recommend, as well as maybe some soft skills as well.
Yeah, so I'll start with the hard skills because that's actually easier. Soft skills are a little bit more vague and arbitrary, but specifically, I think on the data side, there's data visualization, data cleaning, the use of MATLAB, R, Python, SQL, NoSQL, right? Those are all extremely core. Taking those one step further, you're able to leverage them for machine learning, advanced linear algebra or calculus, which comes into place. And then, as Vishal mentioned, if you're working more like the data engineering side, experience with either Google Cloud or AWS, just understanding the infrastructure that these companies provide, what are the different tools within them, how do they all play together, and really trying to think through what is the real use case of the data and building backwards, I think is super core. JavaScript is another really useful one as well. So I would say those are like a good list of like the hard skills. They're all very learnable. Whether you're in a structured program or if you're just learning on your own, there's a tremendous amount of resources online, whether it's individuals who've published like Medium blogs on different projects that they've done, which, they'll typically when people go through like a data science project, they'll start on like data sourcing, data cleaning, go through the visualizations to better understand what the data is, then kick it over to like some of the that more active coding, whether it's R, MATLAB, Python. Sometimes if you're using like a server, you can use SQL, and then spin up, an Anaconda notebook, which is like for everyone else, it's just like a programming interface that you can use. And there you're able to run a lot of your machine learning. Obviously, there's benefits as well, right? If you're using Python, you want to use Anaconda specifically for machine learning because there are a lot of packages, and it's always great to just read about some of like the more popular packages people are using. And then if you're using it more for like the pure core math statistical analysis side of things, like R does work better, but it's really useful to have like I would say a relatively good understanding of the different pieces that go into statistical analysis. So those are like the hard skills from my perspective, and would love to hear everyone else's thoughts. But with regards to the soft skills, I think it's really, data science is rapidly changing extremely fast. And there's a lot of benefit you can get from finding a good mentor, just because of how fast the space is moving, right? So soft skills, being able to like reach out to people, show your interest, kind of show some small projects that you've worked on yourself, show that you take initiative, and really just networking with people that could be mentors or it could also be potential hires, whether it's a cool startup or a company, finding someone there. That's what worked the best for me. And just if you're able to kind of do both of those in succession or together, in congruency, actually, you're able to move forward in the fact of like trying to find a career, finding a job opportunity, but you're also able to advance your skills because when you do apply, they will have like smaller projects or little like assignments that they'll give you, and the first few always feel very difficult, but by like the fifth or sixth one, you're like, okay, I kind of get the hang of this, and it's basically the same as just spending time, effort, maybe a little bit more time than learning how to ride a bike, but once you're able to really understand these core concepts, it starts to make a lot of sense, and it really doesn't seem as overwhelming as it may initially feel. So those are just my quick thoughts there.
Okay, so happy to continue from where you left off. I think you covered a lot of the hard skills required. I'd say just to add on to that, there's all this talk about machine learning and jumping right into machine learning. For somebody just getting into data, I would recommend learning the basics. I mean, sometimes think of machine learning as a black box solution to your problem. When you don't know the solution to your problem, just coming right into it, then maybe you get a machine to try and figure it out. That's how I would say using machine learning in data. Most problems can be simplified into something that a simple algorithm can solve. You can think of, I can think of various cases where a simple regression algorithm or an SVM could have solved something that you train an entire model for. And with the model, you always turn into, well, have I trained it well? Can I actually visualize it? And with simpler algorithms, it's always easier to visualize and understand how your model or your algorithm is performing before you say, okay, let me just move it into this black box where I don't really understand what it's doing, but I do understand the outputs I'm getting. and I'm going to use that. To add on to that as well, I think soft skills, especially at a startup, you're sort of going to have to advocate for using data. And the best way to do that is just create relationships with people, with all the stakeholders that will use the data and say, this is what you're doing, this is what you could be doing, because this is the data that we have. For example, something that we're looking into at Mount right now is trying to use traveler data to actually specifically target, hey, you're traveling to destination X, would you like to do Y? Because we know that they took a bike out when they visited Florida, for example. Being able to use data to drive, well, sales, drive anything, you really have to be the advocate for that. And being able to speak for your role for yourself is actually going to be very important, especially in startups, because, you know, as senior engineers or just senior level leaders, everyone's trying to push the company metrics. Data can help push the company metrics, but especially if senior leaders are not technical, you're going to have to advocate for that, especially if you're the only person in data and you've been hired. That's kind of part of your job. I also see there are some questions coming up. Daryl, I don't know if this is the right time to get to them, but I think the question that I can get to is, which is better, R or Python? I mean, if I'm going to be very honest, it really doesn't matter. You could use both R and Python to do things that they both do. Python, you just have to be a little more explicit. There's not many graphical user interfaces out there for working and manipulating data, but anything you can do with R, you can also do with Python. Personally, I would choose Python because it gives me the flexibility to actually do things the way I want it. I can optimize for using larger data sets, sparse data sets. But I'm sure somebody could argue that they know R better. So it really comes down to what you're most comfortable with.
I think there's oh, sorry, you go.
No, I was just going to pass it on.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I just want to add a tiny bit of color. Maybe it's like a too high level of a whatever. What would that word be? I don't even know. But I think about R, and this sounds very silly, but I think about R as like an academic language, not in that it's like academic, but in that like it's like when you think about what's better than what, like really it's what do you want to do, right? Like that's how you choose your tool. You don't go around with your hammer to do everything. About what are you trying to get done? And so what I see is that R and MATLAB and Python are the three most commonly used frameworks, languages, tools in any academic setting, like in a lab, like a neuro lab or like a chem lab or physics lab or whatever, right? Like all that stuff, even like data labs, like certain like cognitive neuroscience labs, for example, or computational neuroscience labs, sorry. Those are the three, and then when you move outside of academia and go into sort of corporate land, like tech and stuff, like we don't really use R that much. Like I don't think, and we definitely don't use MATLAB. So it's really a Python and onward thing. So it depends what you want to do. If you want to like go into a career in tech, then I would err on the side of what's used in tech mostly. If you want to go into like an academic career, then that's the way that you should go. And just kind of going back to what Sahil was talking about with soft skills, like for me, honestly, it's like on a startup, you want every single person to contribute, and you want every single person to be able to carry their area. And that can't happen if, like, let's say that somebody's like a master of like all the different scripting languages that you would need, and somebody like knows how to work with AWS and like Kubernetes and Google Cloud and like all the different cloud providers. Like, if they don't know how to think, then it doesn't matter. Like, I would never hire that person. It's got to be, you have to be able to think. And so if you can't look at things in a holistic way and say like, okay, here's the data set that I'm working with, here's the problem the company's facing, right? And it could be a big problem, it could be a small problem, it doesn't matter. Let's say it's like, we want to convert, like we want to increase our conversion from like people who hit the website to activation, right, into the product. Like, if you can't look at that holistically and use the data that you have to come up with meaningful recommendations for what we should do, i.e. like a GPS system, like how do we be guided by the data, right? And then every time you get an answer, you have to ask yourself, like, first and foremost, like, does this make sense? That should always be the first question that you ask yourself anytime you get any answer ever. It's like, does this actually make sense? Well, let me look at the inputs, let me look at the outputs, let me see the recommendations that I'd be able to make here. And if it doesn't make sense, like, you can't just rely on the numbers that you get back, right? Like, I know it sounds really silly, but you guys would be surprised about like how many people don't think about things in that way. And it just sets you up for like not a good career. So you have to be able to think. And that's like a very encompassing word, but that's my 2 cents on the soft skills part.
And
Yeah, thanks, Vishal. Oh, sorry, Rishabh, go ahead.
Daryl, I was just going to continue because this is very, very relevant to a question that was asked. Soft skills, and exactly like Vishal said, soft skills like empathy, active listening. I mean, to be able to think, of course, you have to listen first. You have to empathize with your stakeholder, whether it's a customer, whether it's an internal stakeholder, like, you know, I don't know, your head of business development. It's very important because you have to understand why they're asking you to do something or why they're looking for insights. And obviously active listening, just listening in general, being able to say, this is the problem I'm solving, this is how I'm going to do it. You have to be able to translate from a business requirement to something that you can implement, use, and get back to them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Vishal, switching back to you, because I understand a very interesting background from a doctor's point of view, and then now into a CEO of like a Web3 AI kind of startup. How can someone with no experience in data break into this space? We'd be very curious to hear from your perspective as well. What was the transition like, and what was your thought process behind picking up certain skills or picking up certain like programming languages? What was your approach like? And Rishabh and Sahil, feel free to chime in after Vishal as well.
I mean, I think stats is like the most magical hack in the whole world. And so I've always been like statistically inclined ever since I was a little kid, right? Like, it's just about thinking in probabilities. And so I think if you think in that way, then like being able to put words to that way of thinking, the words happen to be the theory and the numbers in data science, right? But like the way of thinking is the statistical way of thinking. And so I think like from like, let's see here, my super surface answer is like, anybody can learn anything, and I truly believe that. So like, go on Khan Academy, like get yourself like the very basics, go on Udemy or Coursera or like edX or wherever. Like, it doesn't really even matter, right? It's like you go anywhere you want and get like an introduction to each of these frameworks or verticals. The other thing is, like, we all have many more hours in a day or a week than we think we do. So one thing that I did like way early was I just started listening to audiobooks, like full like 8-hour audiobooks about data science and like machine learning, even if they were super like formulaic, like in terms of they had lots of formulas in them and they would be verbally described in my ears. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, the point is that you want to be able to like grok the big picture scaffold so that you can start building these mental models in your head for how you should be thinking about these different areas of data. So that, like, everybody's mileage will vary, but there's just so many amazing learning tools and learning resources out there that I don't think any of us have like an excuse to not learn a thing that we want to learn. Audiobooks, courses, like reading, making friends with people on Stack Overflow. Like, there's all sorts of shit that you can do to get there. So, and then once you actually start putting it into practice, it with like work, it's very, very difficult to like unlearn things or to start to suck at it all of a sudden. It just won't happen. So you only get better from there. And sorry, one last thing I'll add, because I know you guys also have thoughts here, is that just seeing like deeply how data is used in lots of different industries, I think that was really helpful for me to like start to pull together like better mental models of how to use it in ways that are always successful. In other words, like, okay, well, I'm seeing it being used this way in education, this way in healthcare, this way in public health, this way in technology, like, and there's always the same underlying through lines and reasoning and logic, so that it makes it easier to kind of do something else with it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Vishal. Honestly, I think you hit a lot of the key points that I was thinking of. For me, I've always been a much more of a holistic person, and it's always easier to drill down once you have a better understanding of what the entire ecosystem is like. And so I would definitely recommend just, for me, the thing that was most helpful was like on Medium or Kaggle, just doing a few different competitions, going through a lot of different projects on Medium, whether they were in the field or industry that I wanted to go to or outside of it as well. I mean, exposure is everything to really help build up like a good solid experience set for someone, to see what are the good things, what are the bad things, what are the pros, what are the cons, right? And a lot of that does take a little bit of time. But if you're actively trying to hack away at something, you tend to learn faster. And for me, like, I was always a much more visual learner, and so I loved like online courses. Yeah, I think those were the most impactful things that I've done so far.
Thanks for that, you guys. So I had an interesting intro into data as well. I was a chemist up until I started doing computational chemistry, and then I realized computation is what I like about computational chemistry, and that kind of started my transition into computer science and really the data field first. I would say what really helped me was that initially when I started, I was thinking about data, except I wasn't thinking of it as data at all. I was just thinking of it as a tool to solve the problems that I was facing in my lab. That way of thinking, I guess, continued on when I made the transition, because I never thought of data as something that I had to learn. I was learning how to solve my problem, and data was the way I was doing it. Something that led me, I mean, like Sahil mentioned, just jumping in and getting your hands dirty is that was kind of the best way for me as well. Just trying things out and seeing, okay, this is what works, this is what doesn't. I actually had a practical education before I had a formal education. Like towards the end of my schooling, I did take a couple courses. I was lucky enough that I was still in school when I learned and got into data. So I took a couple courses and I learned the theory. But it was great to see that I feel like I want to say I had a good intuition on what I should be doing, which was then validated by the theory I learned. So the other thing is, just go down your own rabbit hole. Just like Sahil mentioned, just pick up a data set on Kaggle, go right into it, see if you can get to the same results that everybody else has. If you are able to, then take a look back and see, okay, what did I do? How did I get to this point? I always think just getting somewhere and going bottom up is a good way of learning what worked, what didn't work, and moving on from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks Vishal and Sahel for those insights. I think a lot of important things like training the frameworks and thinking it was really insightful. So changing gears a bit before we go into the Q&A. So just want to ask each and every one of you, what are the prospects of the data industry in the New England ecosystem? I mean, after all, this is a Startup Boston panel, and I know some of you guys spend some time here in Boston as well. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on how mature is the ecosystem and where do people go for like community or go for certain resources in the space?
I can start if you guys like. I think like in New England, it's like amazing prospects. Like especially if you're interested in like science and health and like computational neuroscience and genomes and DNA and all sorts of stuff like that, because there's no better place in the world than New England. No better place in the entire world. And you can get so niche, it's kind of crazy. Like you could go to like the Brigham and get involved in like you know, if you're interested in data for like postpartum women who like have heavy bleeding and what's the outcome from like a, I don't know, like a 5-year her and child mortality perspective. Like you could literally access a shit ton of data and tackle problems in that one specific super niche area, or you can like literally turn your head in that hospital and look up like stroke, like look at stroke data to analyze some other like it depends, and it depends what you like, but the healthcare ecosystem is pretty ridiculous there in terms of like their willingness to engage in new data initiatives. And you have to think about like how some of them are really well funded, some of these labs are really well funded, and some of them are like already at the stage where all the infrastructure is set up, they just need people to help with data analysis, and then you kind of build you get your foot in the door from there, and you build up your skill set from there, and you network, and it's like really a remarkable set of opportunities there. Um, and then when you're ready to take it to the next level, you go and approach like a new PI, whether it's like somewhere at the Broad or I don't know, wherever else you want, and you say, hey, here's a study looking at all your past papers. Here's a study that I think we should maybe do. I'm happy to set up all of the infrastructure. So then you get to flex some data engineering, and then you go from there. So like from a healthcare and health sciences perspective, all encompassing, New England, there's nowhere better in the whole world. From a tech perspective, like a pure tech, like that's where I think like you could branch out and maybe go to San Francisco or like New York or really anywhere else, because we live in a super remote world now. And I'm like bullish on that, or I wouldn't be building the workplace metaverse. Like you could find lots of things outside of New England, and you could even find them in New England. Like we're not at the company I'm building now is not healthcare, but we were still founded at the iLab, right? So anyway, it depends what floats your boat. Like pick your flavor, but New England prospects are pretty remarkable. And if anybody needs help, like thinking about how to approach, you know, potential labs or teams to work with, etc., like you could talk to any of the three of us, and we'll probably be glad to help.
Yeah, thanks for that overview, Vishal. You know, I think your experience in the medical sciences space, you know, tied with data is incredible, and obviously Kendall Square Boston has a huge impact in terms of like the biotech side of things, and you know, data is consistently used in all verticals. Coming from a slightly different perspective on like more of the entrepreneurship side, you know, I think the best part about Boston is that there's so many schools there. So you know, a lot of professors will let students come in and sit through their course if they're interested, even if you're not enrolled in those programs. I know that's a very common thing at MIT too, as well, or at least it was. So would definitely recommend like trying to you know, make your way into certain courses. You know, a lot of these schools have resources that are very open. Whether you're at MIT, you know, there's a tremendous number of accelerator programs. There's a number of startups that are coming out. Same with Harvard, they have their iLab program as well, their innovation lab. And the amount of innovation that's truly going on in that small little city called Boston is astounding. And one of the best parts is Boston is very friendly in the sense that a lot of the individuals doing the research are either in school, recently from school, and they provide a lot of opportunity just because they've all kind of gone through the same steps of their career to get to where they are, right? If you're looking at some of the more like computationally complex things, like MIT Media Lab has a lot of projects that they put out. And those are kind of just the schools in the Cambridge area, but Boston is filled with schools that have a tremendous amount of resources. And a lot of them are really core to helping students find what's their next step and really getting real world experience, right? And even where you guys are potentially sitting, the CIC hosts events, and I remember when I was in school, I would go to them all the time, just from the perspective of learning what people are working on to meeting other cool people who are thinking similar lines. And again, as Vishal offered, I'm sure any of us would love to help navigate the entire ecosystem. It does take a little bit of time to break into, just navigate all of the different resources available. But if you have a clear idea on what you want, or even if you don't, there's an ample amount of resources for people to get that exposure, in my opinion.
Well, one quick thing I'll add is actually two quick things is don't underestimate how amazing it is that it's so freaking easy to get around Boston. Literally you could get one of those electric scooter things, and literally you could go the medical school which is in Longwood to or Fenway Longwood to the iLab, which is in Alston, to main campus, to down to MIT, it's to downtown. You could do all that on a single charge in no time. And in San Francisco, Jesus Christ, it's it's atrocious getting around there. And so depending on where you live, but Boston, you want as much of your time as possible to be able to devote to your craft. And if you're always transiting to meet this prof or meet this CEO or meet this head of data science or CTO, it's just annoying. Or even back and forth to a lab. That's one point. And then the second point is don't be afraid to go and try to intern at a startup over the summer, because or even during the actual semester months, because at MIT and at Harvard, the teams are always looking for interns, right? We have interns in a whole bunch of different areas every single year, and just kind of temper your expectations in terms of cash, especially in this market. And I'm not saying that your guys' work isn't worth it. I'm definitely not saying that. I'm saying that you have to take the opportunity for the opportunity, and you use it for networking, and you'll still get paid, but use it for skill building, networking, honing your craft. And if you're in data science, the cash will flow.
Yeah, and real quick, I was actually going to say clubs are a great resource as well. Clubs are typically not just for the students from that organization, but people can join clubs from different schools. For me, I ended up joining the MIT Bitcoin Club, and I was there for 3 years. And what clubs do is they put you in the right ecosystem. They have a curriculum, potentially. They have people that are interested in this space. So I would say that's another really quick fast track into finding yourself into the world you want to be in. Sorry.
You could also join the legendary MIT Pokemon Club and show them with data that Squirtle is better as a starter than any of the other ones.
I love that.
Yeah, amazing insights. Sorry, Sahil.
Oh no, that was me.
Oh, sorry, was it
Vishal? I think Vishal and Sahil have the best insights on this. While currently we're not right in the middle of the data field. My experience with data in Boston has mostly been through this organization I worked with called BU Spark. They did a great job working with public data sets. So there's actually a lot of nonprofits and, in fact, people working for the Massachusetts state legislators who use data frequently. there's a lot of opportunities specifically within legislator offices to actually analyze these public data sets available, use that to drive their decisions. That's kind of what we did at Spark. And there's a lot of opportunities available because these offices outsource this work. They reach out to organizations that do it for them, but they also hire staff in-house to do that. That is also a great way to get involved. If you're interested in the intersection of policy and data, that is. But yes, Daryl, back to you.
Yeah, universities. Yeah, there's so many universities in the Boston area. I can think of like Start at Shale. I can think of so many entrepreneurial and data science programs. Yeah, so I think now moving on to the Q&A part, we have some questions submitted by the audience. So I can share. Is it? So can you give some examples when a data project you worked on, especially anyone wants to take this question from Andy?
Yeah, I can actually take a first stab at this. We actually did a full analysis of customers and really trying to understand who is our target customer. You know, being an e-commerce brand, we're consistently spending money on acquisition, and you can burn money very fast if you're not targeting or acquiring the customers that make the most sense for your business. So, you know, we went through a full project of just truly understanding who is our demographic, who is our customer based on, you know, the X number of customers that have already purchased from us. And then we put that into action by tying it into our paid media and earned media strategies, you know, thereby helping us reduce some of the key metrics that our business looks at, whether it's return on investment, return on ad spend, or customer acquisition cost. So that was one. When I was in my master's program, I also did a project in partnership with the CME Group, which is like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange Board. And we basically had to create a portfolio management tool. So they're a big company. They have a lot of different verticals, but we were working in their currency department. And basically they wanted to see if we could leverage machine learning to efficiently manage a portfolio of currencies, whether you're holding like the US dollar, the euro, the pound, all the way down to Bitcoin. And we had to train this model. It was much more experimental. And I don't think it was at the stage that they would actually put it into effect. But it was just very interesting to see how different correlations, different models, and different data sources. You know, one of the things that we did was not only training on like technical indicators, but we also trained it visually, using a lot of like graphical indicators or charting indicators. And so, you know, that was just another thing that kind of helped understand where potential red flags could be initiated, when could the system potentially make good decisions on its own versus more just acting as an alerts engine. But those are just the first two that came to my mind.
Just given the number of questions, should we just leave it there, Daryl?
We can go to the next one. So next one's by Jennifer. Just hold on a sec. Yeah, so she's a founder creating a tech product that relies on data. Are there any ways, like practical steps for a founder trying to find like a guide or help to start moving forward?
I can chime into this one. So creating a tech product relying on data. So I'm guessing you are a non-technical founder because you've mentioned that this is not at all your talent, or maybe you're technical and your talent doesn't lie in data. It's of course going to be very important to find somebody in either in the technical space or the data space. Really, there are a couple of ways to do this. First, if you're a student, there's a lot of opportunities for you. Most universities do have innovation centers, innovation labs, whatever you call them. That would be step one. They host a lot of mixers. In fact, in Boston, I think in the next week or so, there's a cross-university mixer that's being held, which the entire goal of which is to connect people interested in startups, in co-founding startups or working at startups, I would say feel free to reach out. I'm happy to provide details on this event. There are Startup Boston, or not Startup Boston, sorry. YC does co-founder matching. There's, I mean, I could go on. There's a lot of resources out there, but I would definitely recommend networking with folks who are interested in this space. Find someone who's passionate about what you're doing and try and rope them in. I mean, I guess I just described the job of a founder, but that's kind of what you have to get started with.
And
Yeah, I think that's. Sorry, Vishal, go ahead.
Just gonna add maybe 1 second. Like you're gonna be looked at as an expert in this field if you're gonna be a founder for it. So you should like literally read until your brain explodes, like so you know everything about this stuff. Because number one, that will help to make you super credible to whichever tech co-founder you're thinking about bringing in. And so that's like my 2 cents on that. Everybody should be an absolute expert in the thing that they're trying to build, even if like you haven't like finalized that you're building it yet. Like you should still get to like almost expert level so that you can evaluate the idea even better and know where all the edges are in that field, right? To know, is this a good innovation? Because remember, all the innovation happens like, or all of like the really exciting innovation happens at the edges of any given field, right? So you need to know where the edges are. And if you don't develop expertise and you don't know where the edges are, and that's not good. The other thing is like just go through like your friends list and go through LinkedIn and find friends of friends and like reach out to these people and tell them your plan and let them know like you want them to be a part of it, and there'll be like equity upside and all that stuff. Like that's how I initially found my first co-founder. We used to play World of Warcraft together like 17 years ago, and we were in the same guild. We co-ran a guild, and then when I was starting my company in 2018, I just messaged him on Facebook randomly. And Facebook is the devil, so like don't use Facebook, but like I used it back then. And I was just like, yo, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And he initially said no. And so you have to also get used to that. But eventually his brother like forced him into it. And that was great for me. And now he's a very happy man. So yeah, like just kind of like become an expert. That's one. And then two is reach out through your networks like crazy and don't, and expect lots of no's, but don't be discouraged.
Yeah, thanks, Vishal. The second one I think can be redirected to you because it's more on mental health and like medical related. So the second one, are you able to see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
It's lagging on my end, but it's by Sudhakar.
Yeah. No, I can see it. I'm just reading the question. Like, I think if I understand the question right, like, I think what you're asking is, like, do you need to get super educated in a particular field or to actually get into that field so that you can get access to particular types of data that you may not be able to get access to? I think that's what I'm reading. If you guys see a different interpretation, let me know.
I think corpus, I could be wrong, but I think they're talking about getting the data itself, just the data in general. Like there's not enough clinician conversation data out there because of HIPAA regulations. So how do they get?
Yeah. No, I mean that's sticky. Like I think you can't really unless you're like in a lab, and the reasons for that are pretty good. Like HIPAA and like what HIPAA stands for. Like sometimes HIPAA is annoying AF because like you really want to push the fields forward, and like we're not out there like leaking data to X, Y, and Z people. Like really, we're trying to build better algorithms to help more people, genuinely. But I think like in this case, and in many cases where healthcare is concerned, like still like there's too much importance in keeping people's information private that like you just have to be in one of the labs, like we said earlier, working in a lab as an analyst or engineer or data scientist. Like then that's how you you get it. So if there's any labs that you're interested in, like any of the mental health labs, I know in the partner system, John Torres, if anybody's ever heard of him, he's like pretty prolific in terms of mental health and data. So maybe go talk to him and then see if he has recommendations about which labs or whomever that has the data sets that you're interested in, that you can get access to. And obviously I'm presuming that it's to go and do something awesome in that field, like otherwise you wouldn't be interested in that data set for no reason.
Yeah, maybe you can go with one last question by Christina. In what ways do you apply the principles of DEI, and particularly equity and inclusion, in your work?
Yeah, I can kick us off there too. So I think equity and inclusion is extremely important. It's one of the reasons why I like data science, is that there's not a lot of limits. I think the information is easily available enough that anyone who does want to learn or enter the field of data does have the ability to do so. It doesn't really require a formal education, even if you're going through the hiring process, right? A lot of the things that you will do that will make you stand out don't come from a formal education, right? It allows for people who may not have access to the resources, may not live in this country, may not, for all the other reasons, they can still get the same chance and exposure to a lot of the very good information available. Use that for any of the assignments when they are looking to get hired. And when you do when you work in data, it's very tangible, and it's very results driven as well, and it kind of helps alleviate a lot of the other considerations that come into other fields. So I do feel like inclusion and equity are very important, and just inherently the way the data science field works, I think it does well for both of those aspects. The way we implement it is obviously just focusing on core output results. Backgrounds change, and as you can see from the diverse panel that we have, the background isn't always the most important thing. It's really the initiative that the person has taken to dive deep into issues that are interesting to them, and then seeing if the issues that you are working on relate to what they're interested in. I think those are like the 2 points I would hit there.
Can I just quickly answer a question that's using open source when working on a startup in terms of how investors would want to invest or not? The one sentence answer is, if it's copy left, then they won't invest. If it's anything else, then they'll consider investing. So just like, I can't expand because of time, but copy left, they're not going to invest.
Yeah, and I guess
Awesome.
to just close this out, I think somebody asked, or actually Maureen asked, how they can reach us. We all have our socials linked in the bottom if you look under speakers. So feel free to reach out.
Great. Well, thank you very much to our panel.